Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. We are your hosts and hopefully your new bookish pals. I'm Hannah MacDonald.
And I'm Lydia Clare. Welcome back, Bookends, to another episode where we get to share with you all one of our favourite recent reads. All the Little Liars is a breathless and captivating new thriller, told across two timelines and tapping into a horrific crime. This novel is a terrifying and compelling story about sisterly love and toxic friendship that asks, how much would you sacrifice to belong?
Victoria Selman is a writer and podcaster. She's the author of the Zeba Mackenzie series, and her debut novel, Blood for Blood, was an instant Amazon #1 bestseller, topping the Kindle charts for 5 weeks. She's been shortlisted for 2 CWA Dagger Awards, and her thriller, Truly Darkly Deeply, was an instant Sunday Times bestseller, a spring 2023 Richard and Judy book club pick, and had the film rights sold to Seesaw Films. Victoria is also co-host of the crime fiction podcast, Crime Time FM, and here to chat about her latest book, All the Little Liars, is Victoria herself. So Victoria, welcome to A Pair of Bookends.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
So we always love to open with our favourite question, which is, what are you currently reading?
What am I reading? And you've prepped me for this, and I'm so glad you did, because people always go blank when you ask, and it's so true, isn't it?
It's true.
Go blank. So I've had a bit of time to think, and I am reading is actually not a crime novel. It's an old favourite, which is Catcher In The Rye. And the reason is, I don't know if other authors that you have on say this, but when you're writing or you're in the middle of a launch, I've just launched All the Little Liars, and it's been super duper hectic. My brain, it almost gets fried. I can't concentrate. And I love to read. And so it's a difficult thing to balance. So my way of dealing with that is just to go back to an old favourite. It's like putting on a pair of slippers, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Catcher In The Rye is one of my very much all-time favourites. I love the voice. I love the character of Holden Caulfield. I mean, who doesn't? And it's such a beautiful story. But what's amazing for me is when I first read it, I was a teenager. So you identify in a certain way. And now let's just say I'm not a teenager anymore. And you get something different out of it. And I love that about wonderful books, that they evolve as you evolve. And certainly this one does that.
Absolutely. It is a true classic. If any of our bookends have yet to go and tackle it, do not be afraid. I feel like it's one of those books where everybody's read it, so you're a bit kind of worried about maybe tackling it. These classic novels that we think are a bit beyond our reach. It is absolutely accessible for any reader, and it is so readable and so interesting and nuanced, and it just is a cracker. It is.
Really is.
It's a good choice.
Yeah, I'm loving it. So yes, loving it again, I should say.
Lydia's more of a rereader than I am, but like neither of us are authors, so I always find it so interesting to see what people are reading whilst they're writing. You know, some people don't like to read anything at all. We've had authors come on and say that they can't read anything whilst they're writing, but quite a lot of authors have said that they prefer to reread. And I know my friend who's an author as well, like she loves to go back and reread things while she's writing, because she finds that if she reads something new, that she tends to start writing in their voice. And I thought that's so interesting.
This for me, it's not so much voice, but I think because my head is so much in whatever I'm working on at that moment, I don't have the headspace to take on a new story. So going to something old and familiar means you've got your head in a book, which is, you know, we love. We obviously, given the name of your podcast, you obviously love it too. But it doesn't have that same challenge. And I feel stupid. I feel so stupid when I can't get into something because my brain is just blocked. So this is my way of feeling a bit less stupid as well.
No, it's such a great book, so I'm really glad that you've mentioned that. Now, I really want to get on to All the Little Liars, so I want to get started by asking about the inspiration for your book. And at the start of the book, you write that the book is inspired by various true crime cases, and I'd love for you to speak in a bit more detail about the particular cases that inspire the book.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm fascinated by true crime. I love it. I'm an absolute true crime nerd, which is I own it. So for me, it's wonderful to tap into real life cases, not to recreate them. I absolutely write fiction, but to use them as jumping off points. It gives me as a storyteller, I have a different sense of something if it's tapping into something that was real. So All the Little Liars really taps into 2 different cases. One is, are you guys familiar with the Skylar Niece case? Have you heard of that?
No.
No, oh good, then I get to tell you about it. So this is a crazy case from Virginia about 15 years or so ago, where 2 16-year-old girls stabbed their best friend to death. And later, they confess to the murder. But when they're asked, why did you do it? All they can say is, we didn't like her. And yeah, I can see your faces. And that's exactly how I felt too. And when I first read about this case, it was years ago, but it stayed with me. It was one of those ones that just drips through your brain. And I was just fascinated by the idea of the psychology of teenage. I'm really interested in psychology. So I studied criminal profiling and criminal psychology. So that's something that always gets my brain going anyway. But I was really interested in the volatility of teenage friendships, how high passions run at that age. I'm a mother of teenagers myself, so I've seen firsthand. Clearly, it was not the case with me. I was perfect in every way. But, but you know, I've seen firsthand how rationality as a teenager goes out the window and your brain is obviously flooded with hormones and emotion and everything else. So I was really interested in what could possibly motivate two girls to kill their best friend. So that was one side of the coin. I've also for a long time been interested in Charles Manson, not so much the man himself, but the hold he had over his so-called family, this hypnotic effect he had on them. How does a man, particularly like that, he wasn't even good looking, for goodness sake. You know, he thought he was charismatic. I mean, but when you listen to his ramblings, I mean, they just sound like nonsense. And yet he had this absolute hold over his group. I mean, they just did these extraordinary things because of what he said. And so I was really interested in that aspect too. And so those two cases, I guess, over time began to mesh a little bit in my mind as an author. But the other thing I'm really fascinated in, and it's a more recent development for me, is the ripple effects of a crime on the people affected by them. So not just the direct victims' families, but the perpetrators' families possibly. So in Truly Darkly Deeply, which was my previous novel, I explored a serial killer's legacy through the eyes of his daughter, for example. So to my mind, she is still a victim. She didn't know what he was doing. She wasn't responsible, but she was jolly well affected. And in this novel as well, it's looking at the ripple effects of a crime on the community, on the family, of the people left behind. So it was all of those things coming together for me that really provided inspiration.
Amazing. Have you read The Girls by Emma
I
Cline?
knew you were going to ask that. And yes, I have. I love The Girls. It's just
so
brilliant.
good.
It's so good. But this is different. So The Girls and what she does, Emma Cline, isn't it? Does so brilliantly. Is she recreates that sense of being in Manson's circle. And it really is very much like that. It's almost just name changes. But for me, I'm not doing that. This isn't a book about Manson.
Yeah.
It's about teenagers, the relationships between them, where those relationships can go outside of hood. So the girl at the centre of the story is very much an outsider. She struggles to make friends. So it explores teenage angst. And we've all felt it. I mean, whatever your teenage experience was, there was always likely a moment when you had a sense of not belonging or desire to belong. So I was really exploring this, you know, how far will you go? Will any of us go to belong? And hopefully then it's a question that even later in life we can ask ourselves as well. So not just teenagers. I mean, it's not a book for teenagers. But...
No, but I went to a girls' school and I definitely saw how the effect of all those hormones and how actually I was so surprised at like how aggressive like teenage girls could be. Like the amount of fights that I saw in a girls' school, it was just...
Yes, because you think of it as a boy thing, don't you? But girls, I also went to an all-girls school. So yeah, that level of bitchiness and frustration is just, it's extraordinary. I'm really tapping into that a lot, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to touch on, obviously you've declared yourself a true crime nerd and you do co-host a crime podcast, and I know that you also have written opinion pieces on true crime for The Independent. Why do you think that true crime has become such a like cultural phenomenon in recent years?
It is a phenomenon, isn't it? I mean, I think YouGov poll that says I think something like a third of all Americans consume true crime at least once a week, which is extraordinary when you think of it. You know, they talk about TV and in books. I mean, it's just amazing. It's not a completely new phenomenon. That's the funny thing. I think as society, we've always been interested in crime. You look at like the Penny Dreadfuls, for example, from the 19th century, and, you know, even Madame Defarge at the gallows, you know, this interest in what is actually out there and the fear. But I think now it's come more into the mainstream, and possibly that's opened it up to more people. And I think as a society, we're aware more perhaps of the dangers out there. Certainly as a mother, I'm super aware of dangers in a way that I think my parents weren't aware years ago. Like we talk about grooming now, don't we? And predators. And my parents didn't really think about it. We played in the road. You know, they weren't watching us. But I would never do that with my kids. I mean, my kids are teenagers now. They do not do that anyway. But do you know what I mean? It's different. So we are aware of the dangers, and being aware makes us frightened. And when we're frightened, we want to protect ourselves. So how do we protect ourselves? We effectively research what is actually out there, and we put ourselves in the shoes of victims. So a lot of these true crime shows, they say most of them are consumed by women, actually. I think like 80% of true crime is consumed by women. And psychologists say the reason for that is the survival instinct. We're literally looking, well, if we were there, how would we defend ourselves? What would we do? So I think it's a little bit of that. It's like there's a lot out there that we're aware of. So now we need to be even more aware, perhaps.
Honestly, one of my favourite shows ever is a show called Snapped, which is basically about women who either kill their husbands or
I woke me up this morning, so he is very much in danger of that later.
Well, this is it. And there's a fantastic moment in every single episode where the voiceover guy just goes, and then she snapped. And like,
that's too dramatic, right?
But I have to say, there's nothing better than a binge watch of
I know, right? But I love the ones that get into motivation. So even, Mindhunter is one of my all-time favourite books and shows, actually. And I know it's true crime. It's based on it, isn't it? But what they're doing is less about the glamorization of the killer or the getting into the story. It's really, really, as the name suggests, getting into the mindset.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting, like you were saying with the Snapped, is this idea that on the one hand, we're looking at, well, what if we were victims? But also there is an element where it's only like Making a Murderer. Do you remember that show from like way back when? And it was this idea that actually, put in the right situation, could we all, as you put it, snap? Could we all do something? Certainly where my mother-in-law is concerned, the answer is probably yes.
No, it is fascinating, and I think that we're definitely consuming a lot more true crime, and I think that I'm a bookseller, and I've noticed a lot of people who have started to gravitate towards more crime fiction and things because I watch loads of true crime and I want to start reading it, and it's a brilliant way of like introducing people into books.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's a great kind of way to link it, to be able to say like, well, if you love that program, if you love Making a Murderer, here's a great book that you'll like.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's absolutely right. And so people who read my books tend to, funnily enough, they do watch a lot of true crimes. There's a lot of elements in the books where there's a story, but I always get muddled if it's actually called this or if I made the term up, but real media. So you got like blog posts, extracts from articles. And so a lot of readers say it reads like a true crime story, like it's almost like you're watching one of those true crime shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, that was my nerdiness coming in, possibly.
We love a nerd. We love a nerd. Don't you worry, you're amongst friends. So talking a bit more about the book itself, one of the key elements, and just for those listening, will hopefully be a spoiler-free episode, so feel free to continue listening. Don't panic. But one of the key elements of the book is about friendship and about sometimes the toxicity that can be involved in friendships. We've touched a little bit on it before. And we do see the difficulties primarily of the teenage girls and their kind of relationship to each other. Was this the theme that you particularly wanted to hone in on in terms of, this age and the way that girls interact and can be influenced by each other?
Yeah, because of the story it all came out of. So it came out of this case, like I was saying, in the States, that was based, literally, they were teenage girls themselves. So it was obviously therefore necessary to explore that side of the psyche, the teenage psyche. And it fascinates me. And I guess because I have teenage children as well, that was another reason. I was saying, I went to a talk, I did a talk yesterday, and I was saying, as writers, we subconsciously put whatever is preoccupying us at the time into our novels. So with Truly Darkly Deeply, I was homeschooling my two boys. It was during lockdown and the world was falling apart, wasn't it? And I was very aware of my parenting, what I was doing to them and how I could help them and maybe how I wasn't helping them. And I guess at the heart of that book, yes, it's about a serial killer and his daughter, but it's also really a question of parenthood, the impact that parents have on their children. And so similarly with All the Little Liars, my younger son has just turned 13. My older son is 16. And so they are teenagers. And I suppose what is my deep down preoccupation? Well, fear, I guess. Fear of what that teenage world holds for them. The idea that they are no longer little children that I can keep safe like little ducks, as I'm no longer a mother duck for them. They are going out into the world. They are spreading their little ducky wings. Sorry, I should change that metaphor. It's a bit rubbish. But you know what I mean? So that is, I guess, my deep down preoccupation. So I wonder if that's why was that case I honed in on all the other cases out there? Why was that the one that was in my brain going nickety nick? And so maybe that's why as well. So there's always something else.
I love it. And I feel like it's something that is very, and this is what I think makes it more scary and thrilling, is because it is very real. It feels like it can happen. And obviously we see it in real cases of people being influenced to do things, or, you know, falling in with the wrong crowd and then it having, you know, ridiculous consequences. And what I really love in a crime novel is that kind of relatability, which this does really well.
I was talking to my editor about this, and I think this is literally what it's always about. Like, if you have a book where you can't imagine that you might be that character, then you're not going to really invest in it in the same way, are you?
No.
And I think in this book, it's told through the voice, actually, not of the girls involved, but of the sister of one of the girls. And so that hopefully as well, it's like, well, okay, maybe you couldn't imagine stabbing your best friend, but could you imagine having a sister who maybe felt like she was growing away from you and maybe falling into influences that you didn't like, but also you couldn't do anything. And every time you tried to say anything to maybe your father or whoever, our mother is dead in the story, whoever else, that you're seen as just being jealous or selfish. But you can see something isn't right. But as a child, you're completely impotent. So there's lots of different strands, I think, maybe, I hope, in this book that people can put themselves in those people's shoes, perhaps.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
I really wanted to actually, with you just mentioning about perspective, I really wanted to ask about the perspective that you chose to write the book from. And as you've said, it was the sister of one of the teenagers involved in this case. The perspective that it's told from is somebody that wasn't, I don't know if I can say this, but wasn't witness to the case. I can say that. Wasn't present. Yeah. I wanted to know, why was it important to you to have it from an outsider's perspective, and why did a sister feel like sort of the right role rather than, say, a parent?
I think it's a brilliant question. So I said at the beginning, one of the things I'm really interested in is the ripple effects of a crime on the people left behind. So the sister is left behind, and it's a dual timeline narrative. So we see whatever is happening in the past tense, and we see the repercussions of that in the present tense. And you've obviously got the drama of there's a journalist who comes along and knows more now about the case. So the girls that are arrested, they confess to the murder, but something never quite gels about that. Something never quite feels right. And so you have a situation where maybe now the truth can come out that's haunted her for so long. So the ripple effects, my interest in the ripple effects of a crime is why I chose a sister, or rather not one of the girls directly. Why a child? I think because of the sense, like I was saying, of impotence. So there's I don't know if you know about this character in Greek, it's Greek mythology, ancient mythology, let's say, called Cassandra. I remember learning about this at school. So Cassandra was, for whatever reason, she was cursed by one of the gods to see the future, but never be believed. And I thought that always makes me tingle. Like when I think of that, can you imagine? You can see bad things happening, but nobody listens to you. How dreadful that would be.
Horrific.
And so what if you have a child? I mean, nobody's listening to a child. So this character, Finn, who is the sister, sees that there is something wrong with the friends of her sister, and sees that she doesn't understand. She's a child. And by the way, the not understanding is a part of it as well, because I need her confusion to come through and for the reader to figure out more than the character at the time is. So the reader is more aware because they've had the detail from the present day, and we've got all the blog posts and whatever else coming through. But that sense of not being able to do something about something was something I was playing with as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm the oldest. I've said this on the podcast before, so listeners are probably like, okay, you've said this 100 times, but I am the oldest of 4 girls, and the reading it from a sister's perspective, like it made it all the more like visceral for me, because I was like, I don't even know what I would do, like if one of my sisters did something like that, because, you know, it would be so out of character for my sisters. And like, how do you even comprehend that? Like, how do you get your head around that? Yeah. You think you know somebody so well, and then they just like do something as, I don't know what the right word would be. It's so like
things, or they bring a situation that you just would never imagine that they were in.
Yeah.
She can't imagine it. And that's like, and so I was struggling with this book a little bit because I needed the reader to know certain things that this character Finn couldn't possibly know. And I was like, how do I get that in? And that's why I began to use the device of her sister's diary. So there are ways of being able to tell the reader something. But yeah, exactly as you say, you never, in fact, this is, I'm playing with an idea for my new book, and it's this idea that you never know the people. You just, how well, we think we know our parents, don't we? But how well, or our siblings or whatever, there's always a secret side.
Yeah. We had Megan Nolan on the podcast a bit ago, and I don't know if you've read her latest book, Ordinary Human Failings, but that is inspired by true crime cases, and it's a young I don't know how old the character was. Do you remember, Lydia?
What, the young girl?
Yeah.
She's about 8.
Yeah, so very young, and she's
Yeah.
responsible for a murder, and it calls into question the whole idea of like nature versus nurture and all that kind of stuff. And I always find that topic like so fascinating. But then you look at it, that there's this one sister that's never done anything like that, but they've been parented in the same way and they've been brought up in the same way. So like where does that switch come from? It's so fascinating.
I find it fascinating too. I was reading as part of my studies for criminal profiling, this guy, Robert Ressler, he worked at the FBI, and he talks about how serial killers, they all have the same background. They all have a cold and distant mother. They've all had emotional neglect, various things they've all got in common. And yet, he says, there are hundreds, thousands of other people who've also had those same upbringings who do not go on to become serial killers. So what is it? Exactly as you say, what is it? And I used to be so interested in that. So my series fiction that we talked about before, the Zeba Mackenzie series, was really all about what makes a monster. It's exactly as you say. But I think I'm evolving, I'm graduating, whatever the expression is. And I'm now less interested in what makes the monster. I'm more interested in what is the impact of the monster. Mm-hmm. And I love a mystery, so my books are obviously very twisty, and there's hopefully mystery at the heart, where you don't know what you're getting. You just hopefully they're quite suspenseful, but ultimately that is the preoccupation.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, you do it very well.
Thank you.
And Bookends will know. I love a good binge of a book.
Yeah.
But oh my goodness, could I not put this down? And it is like you were saying, there are twists and turns in it that you wouldn't ever expect, and it is so well done. One of the things that I found quite fascinating about it was that the kind of main setting of it was in 2003, and you had this really brilliant way of kind of intertwining real events and highlighting moments that kind of helped to situate us. Oh, okay, we're here now. What was that like to create? Was that a kind of like, I'm gonna research 2003, or was it just that, I'm just gonna find some cultural events and try and put them in? Or can you tell us a bit?
A little bit of both. So actually the cultural events, so the Iraq War was obviously the huge one at the time, and you had do you remember they were literally there at this point trying to get Saddam. There was and they kept messing it up. Not messing it up, that sounds terrible, but do you know what I mean? It kept going wrong for them. And so for me, there was obviously that element of cultural contextualizing, so to situate the reader exactly as you say, but also the cultural events that I cite, the music or whatever it was, because there is all of this stuff woven in, is always a metaphor as well for whatever is happening in the book at the time. So for example, I think, I'm probably going to get this wrong now, it was a while ago since I wrote it, but there was a point where I think the Americans did a raid on somewhere, they had some information and they thought they were going to get him. They were like, yes, okay, we've got him. And he wasn't there. So it was that moment of, we think we're there, I'm not. And in the book, something similar has happened. You think that you're going to get an answer. You're about to get there. And then suddenly you don't. So there was that. And I can't think of all the other bits now to show you, but I do something similar as well with Truly Darkly Deeply. So, for example, there's an element with the royal wedding with Charles and Diana. And do you remember we all thought it was a fairy tale wedding at the time, and it was just like whatever. But now, of course, we know it was far from it. And ditto, in this case, the relationship in Truly Darkly Deeply with my characters, the father and the mother characters. So there was obviously a lot of disconnect going on where actually on the surface it seemed very fairy tale like. So I like to do that a little bit as well. So there's always hidden messages in what I write, really. But you don't have to.
Fun. It's so much fun, honestly. It's brilliant. It really is. And I cannot recommend it enough for like book clubs and things like that, because this is a great book to chat about and discuss. And I feel like a lot of people will have lots of different opinions about motive and what happened and what they think should have happened, and it is a great book club book.
Oh, thank you.
I can totally see this being adapted as well. I know Lydia's probably going to roll her eyes at me because I love an adaptation, but
I love an adaptation. Yeah,
I can totally see this being adapted. Like, it's just, and it's really hard to do this spoiler free because the temptation.
I know, it's so hard. Even I have to think when I'm answering your questions, how is they think?
The temptation to talk to you about different moments in the book.
Yeah,
be like, oh my God, like
it was fun to write. That was really fun.
I can imagine.
Yeah. It was. I love to turn things on their head. But it's funny. I don't know if you find this with a twist. It can't just be thinking of another way of doing it, thinking of somebody that nobody else thought of or whatever it is. It has to absolutely work. So a twist can't just feel hammered on, can it? It has to. Every breadcrumb has to be there. So my hope is that when you get to that twist, which is obviously the one you're thinking of, that people then feel the need to go back almost to the beginning and reread it with that in mind. So that's my hope for it.
I was thinking that I really want to go back and reread it, knowing the things that I know. So this might be one of the handful of books that I actually go back to reread. Yeah, it was so much fun to read, whilst also, it's dark and it's so many different things, but it was also so exciting and twisty and fun. And I think, like Lydia said, this would be such a brilliant book club pick. And also, I can imagine this being a great book to take on holiday with you, because I mean, if I did, I wouldn't be doing anything else on the holiday. I would
Thank you.
But it's so good. Now, obviously I've just touched on it, but there were some pretty dark and tricky themes in the book, but I felt that you explored those really well. And there were themes like so just a trigger warning for anybody, but there were themes like grooming and sexual abuse of children, essentially.
On the page, if you see what I mean.
Not on the page.
No. I couldn't write that. I just think I just couldn't. So it's all very much just implied rather than shown, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I imagine they were difficult things to navigate in your writing. And what I wanted to ask were there any significant choices or changes that you had to make whilst writing to ensure that these things were portrayed truthfully, or if there's a way that you wanted to navigate them in a certain way?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, how to navigate them is the important thing. So everything is off camera. You don't see, there's no blood in the book. I'm quite squeamish, so I hate books where it's lots of blood and gore. So there's nothing like that. And ditto, I hate books where you see actual sexual violence. I just can't deal with that.
Yeah.
Into that, it's a bit different. You just get a sense of something that's happening. And I think in a way that can actually be more powerful also, because you just let the reader's imagination fill in the gaps. And that's the wonderful thing about a book. You can do that. You're in a relationship with the reader, which I love. So yeah, it was very much a choice not to put it onto the page. Actually, that's not the sort of book I wanted to write at all. It's more about the psychology, I think, of it, which is what fascinated me. And in terms of changes, no. Putting Izzy's diary in was actually a big. There was a point where I was just like, there's something missing. It's just not quite there. How do I do it? And I couldn't figure it out, because it would be ridiculous for the sister to know certain things that I needed the reader to know. It would be nonsense. They just happen to overhear a conversation. Rubbish, that doesn't happen. So and it's not massive amounts, but just a few diary pages sort of interspersed was my way as well of dealing with that and getting a different voice coming through as well. So that then she's been called an unreliable narrator, but I think it's more that she just has a perspective. So the idea is, the reader needs to kind of figure things out too. The reader is reading this book is kind of playing detective as well. They're given everything that in fact my character is not given. So can they figure out the truth before she does?
Yeah, I think I would actually disagree that she's an unreliable narrator, because for me it's not because she is intentionally trying to mislead the reader. Yeah. This is just the information that she has to hand. So this is all she can think.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't think I would call her an unreliable.
No, that's exactly how I feel. And she has filters. She's a child. So again, doesn't have that emotional maturity to make sense of what she's seeing. And although it's a retrospective voice, because I think otherwise I think it can be quite difficult to write a child. So you have sort of that retrospection coming in. I still wanted to keep that child filter on there as well. Thought that was important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's, I don't know, sometimes makes it more of a mystery, because it's up to us to try and figure out, and it is up to us to fill those gaps in.
Yes.
And like we were saying about things that are real make it more scary. I think sometimes when you haven't got all the information and you do start having to think about what could it be or what could have happened, like 9 times out of 10 your imagination is going to be worse than what it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I 100% agree. There's a story I always tell about Val McDermott, and I forget which particular book it is, but she has a story or whatever it is about there's child abuse, and the character is looking at child porn on the computer, and apparently somebody went up to misquoting and everything else, but went up to her at some festival and started lambasting her. How could you write such a disgusting scene? You should be ashamed of yourself, blah, blah, blah. And just like, she's just sitting there quietly, letting this person say what they're saying. And at the end, she said, actually, I didn't write any of that. You did. So it was their imagination again that filled it. And so exactly your point, it goes to different places. And I think that's where the reader puts themselves into the book, which is really, again, we were talking about relatability before. That is what it's all about. You are in a relationship with the reader. And so every reader will interpret a book differently because their own experiences are different and colouring their perception of the story.
Yeah. And just to let our listeners know, you know, obviously I gave trigger warnings and we spoke about the topics that you explore in the book. But I think, as you said, you know, you don't directly show anything on the page.
Yeah,
and that's why I think it was explored so well, because it isn't something that's going to traumatize somebody. It's not that kind of book, you know, but it does. I think it is important to mention those things, especially considering the cases that this is inspired by, because, you know, these things happen and these things have happened. So it's not something that you can just avoid.
But I would be untruthful and
exactly. But you just you handle them really well. I think, you know, for that reader that approached, I don't know how to pronounce her name,
Dermot, yeah. I know, it's a harder one.
But I think, you know, the reader that approached her in that way, like it's clearly something that they felt immensely triggered by. But writers can't just avoid writing about these things because they do happen.
They do, and it makes sense of what happens as well. I mean, Charles Manson, obviously, there was, you know, exploitation going on.
Yeah.
And that was one of the questions I was asking myself at the very beginning. You know, what would it look like if Charles Manson were alive today? It wouldn't be a load of sort of hippie community type stuff. It would be different. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think following on from that, one of the things that, and we have touched on this before, but that I found the most impressive, I don't know if impressive is the right word, but most impressive thing about the book.
Impressive.
You can have impressive.
Fantastic.
Yeah. But yeah, one of the things that I found most impressive about it was that this is a book that completely avoids cliche and sensationalism. There is no element in it where you feel like it's not victim-centered, or it does, like you were saying, it explores those left behind when something traumatic happens in a family. I know that you are fascinated with that, but do you think that this has become more of a trend nowadays for people, particularly for readers, looking for victim-centered novels, as opposed to, this is my opinion, but I would say 10, 15 years ago, we were looking at more kind of like gory and sensationalist fiction?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. It's certainly what I'm going in my writing. I don't want to celebrate a killer. I just, Patricia Cornwell read Truly, Darkly, Deeply, and what she said to me was exactly that. It's great because you do not celebrate the killer. And so, you know, I just sort of refer to the celebration of a killer as another line I use, because that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Is not, or rather not do. It's interesting. I think there is a bit of a movement towards it. I mean, we've seen books like Notes of an Execution, for example, and there are others like that are definitely moving towards more victim-centered stories. But I still have, I don't know how popular they are, but there's still a lot of books, serial killer books particularly, where to my mind there is a sort of glorification. I call it a serial killer porn, which sounds terrible, but it does feel like there's a sort of over exploration or even exploitation of the violence. You know, the description of these disgusting things that these serial killers, I can't think of obvious ones, but, you know, really, really over the top. You know, they've done this and they've done that and da-di-da-di-da, and getting into the mind of the killer. I don't know. To my mind, I'm starting to find that quite distasteful, to be honest. I think there is, for some people, there's an appetite, clearly, otherwise it wouldn't be being published. I hope that as a society, we are more interested in the victims, because they are the ones that matter. But I think by the same token, society is always interested in the bogeyman as well, because that's the thing, like we've said at the beginning, that's the thing that scares us. So I don't know. I don't know where it's actually moving to. I only know where I'm trying to go, I guess.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you've got to write a book that's exciting. So, you know, I've got, they're victim-centered, but there's still mysteries, there's still thrillers, hopefully, and just thrilling in a different way, maybe.
I think it's a great example, this book, of how you can do that and how it doesn't have to be body after body after body. And, you know, and usually, let's face it, it's young, vulnerable women who are at the centre of these stories that are kind of used as, I mean, I don't want to besmirch crime, but they are kind of used as fodder, you know, because, let's chuck another victim in, as opposed to what you want to read, which is a story that explores why.
That's what I'm interested in. I'm so interested in the why. The why do we do the things we do? What is the effect? How do we... And also, I hope my books are a bit hopeful as well. So I try to sort of... There's always an element of redemption at the end. There's hopefully an uplift. They don't end on a dark note where you just feel bloody miserable when you put the book down. There's hopefully... You know what I mean? So this character, she's been through absolute hell, and the book obviously is opening when she's in the middle of, you know, dealing with that still. But by the end of the book, there is an arc where she has found resolution, effectively. Hopefully it hasn't been tied up with a bow, because I hate that as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But it's still hopefully a hopeful ending as well.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
I really want to move on now to a character that I really loved. I don't know if you're going to know straight away which one I'm talking about, but I really loved Dita.
I thought you were going to say that. I loved writing Dita.
I love her so
Amazing.
But she is for our listeners, she's their housekeeper and nanny to the two sisters in the book. And it felt like she went above and beyond in the role that she plays in their lives. Yeah. And she felt like a truly valued like family member to them. You know, she wasn't, I think there's a danger to sort of dismiss these people as just being, I mean, she is offended in the book and referred to as the help.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, she's not that to this family. She's so much more than just the housekeeper and the nanny. And I wanted to know, what was the inspiration for featuring this character in this family dynamic?
You know, the inspiration, we talked about classics at the beginning. My all-time favourite book in the world is To Kill a Mockingbird. And so I think you don't always know exactly where it's come from, but I had read that recently. And Calpurnia is, of course, that housekeeper character. And so in a similar situation, the two girls in my story are motherless. So the mother has died in a car accident when they were young. This is one of the reasons why Finn's sister has social issues. She's never really dealt with her trauma. Well, I won't bore you with going into it all, but that's obviously an issue. So the dynamic is quite similar in that you've effectively got a father raising his two children. In my story, they're two girls, of course, in To Kill a Mockingbird, they're a boy and a girl. But he's a judge, so he has this powerful job. So he would have to get somebody to come in. There's no way he would be able to just be a stay-at-home dad. So he would have to have someone come in. And actually, Dita comes in before the mother has died, even because I needed the mother to almost give her the approval. Do you know what I mean? Like for the reader to know that was all okay as well. And she becomes a mother figure, these two girls. So certainly for Finn, who is 3 when her mother dies, Dita is really the mother that she knows. Yeah. And so I guess one of the themes I was also exploring in the book was love. You know, we talk about how far would you go to belong, but also how far would you go for the people you love? How much would you sacrifice for them? What lengths? And Dita is, very much of that ilk. She sees the girls as her children, her cubs, and and likewise, they'll do anything for us. But she was fun. She was really fun because she has her funny little sayings. And so I think in crime fiction, comedy is also important, or humour, not necessarily comedy, but she is the book's humour points. So her relationship between Finn, the sort of the interaction between those two characters was, yes, a way of obviously moving the story along and showing the themes, but also as oftentimes the moments of light relief as well.
She was such a great character, and I loved her so much. And I don't know if you've read the book, I think it's called Now You See Us by Bali Kaur Jaswal. That was a great book, and I always find it really interesting with the way that people write these kinds of characters that are like housekeepers and nannies. And I think there's such a danger for people to sort of dehumanize them, if that makes sense. And I felt like Dita felt like a fully rounded character. She felt like a full human being, and you explored her in all her complexities and all of the wonderful things about her, and the way that she, really cared about these girls and took them on as her own. And I just loved her so much. And
thank you.
I think she's one of my favorite ever characters.
Oh, amazing. All I want is a hug from her.
I know, right?
Like, I was literally like, I bet she's a really good cuddler.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she was, like I said, she was so fun. And she was one of those characters I didn't have to think about. In fact, I remember when I was sending my synopsis to my editor, I think I must have already known who Dita was, because she was sort of in the synopsis. Like there was one line about her, I can't remember what it said. And Steph, my editor, was like, oh, I really like Dita. I'm like, she can tell that already just from the synopsis.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. I think I knew her, like, to be able to put that into whatever it was.
We love her. And we love the book. The book is just absolutely incredible, and we can't recommend it enough. Before we do let you go, I always love to ask this question to writers, which is, what does a average kind of working writing day look like to you? Do you have little rituals? You got to have like a coffee? You go like... Tell me, please.
Tell you. When it's a real average day, that's easy, because I write my children at school and I do the drop off and I do the pick up. So then my writing is in between, and the dog has to get walked and I have to eat lunch and all that stuff. So it starts off with a dog walk after I drop off, and then I come home and I write, and then I don't know, at some point my back starts to hurt because I've been sitting too long. So I go and kick the ball back with the dog, and then I come back and then I write a bit more and have some lunch, and then I write a bit more. So it's literally, I just fit it in. So that's my day. But the harder bit is when the kids are not at school. Not because they're little and they need me all the time, but I need not quiet. I don't care if there's chatting going on somewhere or whatever, but oh, my bloody kids, they knock on my door. I was going to say they knock on my door. They don't knock on my door. They barge in and they demand, they're interrupting that. And so that's really hard. So in the holidays, I find I actually get up early. I like to have that. Who was it? Sylvia Plath. She talks about that like special moment before the baby wakes, doesn't she?
Yeah.
I don't have babies anymore. I've just got very noisy kids. But that's like early time before they've got up, and delightedly they're actually sleeping longer because they are teenagers. So that stretches now. So there are those early point moments. And my favourite time, my favourite time to write, and I always find my best work gets done here, is like when the real edits get done. So all the flyers take a bit of time to get into shape. And it was over Christmas that suddenly it was like, bam, it got nailed. I just nailed it then. And that's because there's something about when I don't know if you find this when it's dark outside.
Yeah.
And the house, there's something just, I don't even mean the spookiness, but the coziness maybe.
Yeah.
And that's when I just want to hunker down and I want to tell a story, when the light's low. So yes, there's not a ritual as such. I love to write. It's like you can't stop me write. I could write anywhere. I do write anywhere. So that's how it looks. Long-winded answer. Sorry to very...
No, I love it. And are you the type of writer that kind of you say, right, okay, I'm going to write 3 chapters today, or I'm going to write, 10 pages, or are you just kind of, I'm just going to see what comes out?
Well, it's not so much seeing what comes out because I plan really, really carefully before I sit down to write anything. So I always know where my story's going. Like I have a whole detailed plan. It often changes as I go a little bit because, you kind of get into the character's voice and you can't know properly the character's voice until you actually start writing. So there is always an element of change. So I know where it's going. Lots of writers, a lot of my friends, like, I've got to get X number of words down. My God, I would find that stressful. No, I don't. I just write. And some days I write more than other days. And I have deadlines, I know my editor needs to see my pages, but somehow it just works, but it's not ever like, oh, I need to feel the muse before I can write. It's nothing like that. I just know but then it's funny as well, because, you sit down some days. I don't know if other people say this to you. And that sometimes the blank page is the most beautiful thing you can imagine because anything can go on that blank page. And other days it's really daunting.
Yeah.
Because you just haven't started. But the minute your fingers hit that keyboard, the fear goes and you're in it. You're just in it. And it's kind of like magic. There's a kind of magic in telling a story.
Absolutely.
So much.
Is that very corny? I bet that sounds so...
No. I'm like, how do we get that as a soundbite? Let's make sure we think that.
No, it's
Selman says corny things.
no, it's like very cool writer vibes. Like I want to be you. Like that's.
I really don't. I just thought I'm a messy study. I do not want to be. Nothing in the fridge today.
Our final favourite question to ask is if you've been enjoying anything recently, and if you've got any recommendations for us. So it can be books, TV, film, podcasts, anything at all.
Anything. Oh, that's a big old... You were going to give me a heads up to these questions.
All right.
What I enjoyed. Well, I'm loving Catcher In The Rye, like I said, so I'm really enjoying it. What am I enjoying? I'm trying to think what I've watched. I watched something dreadful on Netflix. And my husband is a starter finisher. And this wretched show, it went on for like 5 seasons. And even at the end of the first season, I'm like, oh God, Tim, can we just watch something else? No, we have to. I was like, but you don't even like it. I know, but I just need to know where it ends. So it felt like, like TV time at the end of the day is supposed to be nice and relaxing. It felt like work because we just... And I won't say what it is and be cruel like that, but it was just wretched. We've now started, what's it called? Catastrophe.
With Sharon, is that Sharon Horgan? No, I really want to watch it.
You know what's brilliant about it? It's not the storyline so much, but the dynamic between the 2 characters, the dialogue. And I'm so into dialogue. So my books are filled with dialogue. I love it. And I think that's like the best way of getting character across is just the way they speak and the way they interact with other characters. So for me, it's not crime at all, but that interaction between these 2 characters, the interplay is just really, really good. So I'm very much enjoying that. And I'm also enjoying vanilla ice cream with hot chocolate sauce at the moment. So that's my other thing. It's really hot, so I'm allowed to eat ice cream, right?
Oh, man.
Nice. And I really want to go away and have that now for breakfast.
Right?
Listen, I know where I'm going now.
Straight to the fridge.
Such a good
Right to the fridge.
Now, we're obviously very sad because we have loved this conversation and
I've loved
your book. So thank you so much. But for our listeners, your book, All the Little Liars, is out now. and published by Quercus, and I'll be popping a link in the show notes. I'm also going to pop a link to a couple of your other books in the show notes as well, especially Truly Darkly Deeply. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Truly Darkly Deeply.
Because I
think
think
if
I
you
might
like
line that up now.
that's the one to read as well if you want.
Yeah.
You know what as well, and I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, and I should have cleared it with you first, so just edit it out if you don't want to say it. But I have some gorgeous bookmarks my publisher sent across. So do you want me to send some over, and maybe like the first 5 people to maybe like and rate this episode and go out and buy a book? We'll send them a copy.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is that okay? Sorry, I totally put you on.
Oh my God, no.
No.
Okay,
So that. Let's do it.
just let me know where you want me to send them, and I'll
Let's do it.
We will. Thank you.
Listeners. That's so amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, no.
Now, where can our listeners find you on social media?
Okay, so I'm on all the social channels. So I'm on Twitter, that we're not allowed to call Twitter anymore, which I'm at Victoria Selman. Although my son says now that they can't even use X because apparently Facebook and Microsoft own those trademarks.
It's so
That's going to get rebranded, I guess, as well. So I'm on Twitter /X/we'll wait and see at Victoria Selman. I'm on Instagram. I think it's just at Victoria Selman author, actually. And Selman is Selman. And I think Facebook is probably at Victoria Selman as well. But if it's not, it'll be at Victoria Selman author. Oh, and I have a website and a newsletter. So my website is Victoria Selman author. There you go.com. I'm so original.
I love that, but you're easy to find, so that's
I'm easy to find. Yes, I am.
And I'm pleased that you've got a newsletter as well, because I was signing up for that.
Subscribing.
Yes,
great.
But Victoria, thank you so much for coming on A Pair of Bookends. I've absolutely loved chatting to you.
I've loved it too. Thank you for having me.
You're such a ray of sunshine, like you really are. Like,
oh, not saying my books. Let me stop.
And listeners, please do go and buy the book, and please do go give Victoria a follow. And if you would like to follow us, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. And that is all from us. So thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.